What? That's a hell of a background. What's up with the clown?
Oh, he's one of the characters. He's great.
And this is Twisted
Um,
Metal.
yeah, dude, it's really good. Um, yeah, we can just start if you want.
Let's go.
All right. Yeah, so Twisted Metal stars Anthony Mackie, Stephanie Beatrice, and this guy who is played by, I don't know if he's a professional, like physically played by like a professional wrestler or what. He's always got the mask on and he's voiced by Will Arnett. It is the least over the top I think Will Arnett's been in a long time. Like it's definitely his voice. He's not as silly as he usually is, but he's like, I mean, he's a psychopath. Like he's crazy. And they get into in one of the later episodes kind of why he's as crazy as he is. Um, or at least that he's been crazy for a long time. Uh, but the gist of the show is that there was this apocalyptic event. And so now we're essentially living in, in the post-apocalyptic landscape. And there's the people that live in these closed off cities that are safe. And then there's the outside where, you've got your ravagers or whatever crazy shit's out there. And there's places that you can't go. There's been, nuclear explosions, um, nuclear power plants have exploded, things like that. So there's parts of the world, parts of the country that aren't safe. And so people like Anthony Mackie are, I forget there's a name for them in the show, but they're basically runners. So they go from, they take packages from point A to point B, and that's their job. That's all they do, just drive all the time. They don't, there's a lot of unrealism in this, and you kind of just take it for what it is. Like, if there was an apocalypse tomorrow, if you didn't have people continually manning uh, petroleum plants, gasoline goes bad. Over time, gasoline breaks down and is not usable anymore.
Hmm.
So like they just ignore that. Like he gets gas all the time. Not a big deal. And it's not. You watch it and it's not really leaning on realism. So you're okay with it, right? Just take it for the adventure that it is, right?
Mhm.
Um, but oops. But he it's the most personality I think I've seen out of Anthony Mackie in anything in a long time, and he's awesome. Like he's so good. Like he's fun. And the you watch the first episode and it draws you in pretty quick, and it does a really good job of it. It starts off, he kind of explains the world and what he does, and then he drops something off in San Francisco, and as he thinks he's done, like the mayor of San Francisco or whatever she is, played by Nev Campbell, who I feel like is making like a comeback right now. Like
Good.
she's on The Lincoln Lawyer, she's on this, and she she tells him she has 10 days. She needs him to get something from Chicago and come back in 10 days, um, which is a pretty big feat in the world as it is. There's some crazy shit out there. And so I think what the deal is that they will give him any one thing that he wants, anything. And there's a joke. If you watch one of the trailers, he's like, she's like, I can give you anything you want. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, really, like, whatever. And he's like, cool, I could, what about you mean like 2-ply toilet paper? And she's like, better. And he's like, oh, 3-ply? Like, and he's like totally like serious. Like he's just blown away by like, this opportunity to, to get cool shit. And so that's the adventure. And along the way, he bumps into her character's name is Quiet. That's Stephanie Beatrice of Brooklyn Nine-Nine fame,
Okay.
and she's great. When he meets her, she doesn't talk. So for a while, she has no dialogue until they run into the clown, whose name is Sweet Tooth. Um, and yeah, I mean, she's really good. They have a great relationship that kind of bounces back and forth, between frenemies and whatever as the story goes on. Um, and along the way, you find that there's this. I don't quite want to call it a police force, but Thomas Hayden Church plays this guy that's kind of like ruling the roads and has all these stops set up to stop these runners and to stop people from doing stuff. Like he's a real asshole, and he wants to be, in charge of shit. And so it's really good, and it goes, it the way that it ends, it definitely sets up a sequel, like 100%. There could be a second season, um, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the second season if they do it. Um, but at the same time, like if they didn't get it, it would be okay. But I'm really hoping that it does. I want to say that it's one of the best like reviewed or the best received shows Peacock's ever had, because that's where it's streaming. Sorry, I never said that, but it's streaming over on Peacock. Um, and let me look it up on Rotten Tomatoes really quick. But it did really well. I think it was their best scripted series to date, as far as, like I said, reviews and reception. So it's a 70% from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes, which is good, especially for something that's so kind of over the top. And it's a 94% from the audience.
Well, there you go.
So yeah, and in this, for this one, I really think that I lean towards the audience score. I mean, the critics generally speaking are giving it good reviews. One thing that's really nice about it is that it's only about 30 minutes an episode, and there's only 6 or 8 episodes. I might be wrong about that. Let me see real quick. But there's not a ton of episodes. Like I watched it in 2 days. Like I just absolutely burned through it. It's 10 episodes, but I still, like, I burned through it in 2 days. Like it was just really easy to watch. It's based on a video game series. And the whole point of the video game series, and they kind of get into it a little bit, but they don't focus on it like it does in the series, is that in the video game series, it's the idea that there's this tournament between these drivers, and if you win, you can have any one thing you want. Like that's the point of the games, and they've done a few different iterations of it. A lot of the different characters and stuff are in it. Sweet Tooth is always a big one. And if you've ever seen the promotional material, he's like on the cover of all of them. And it's I've actually never played the series. Driving games aren't always my favorite, but it looks like a fun enough series. I have a feeling that this is going to give it a little resurgence, the series. But I mean, overall, I 100% recommend it. I think it's so fun, but at the same time, especially as it gets going, there's so much heart in it too. Like the way the way they develop the characters and the things that they've been through, and the stories that they're telling with those characters, is pretty incredible. For something that is so bizarre and so tight, for 30 minutes an episode, they do a really good job of getting stuff in there. And comparing it, not necessarily directly, but kind of comparing it to something like Secret Invasion, where I believe that should have been a movie. Like you could have cut some stuff out and made a movie. You're looking at about a 5 hours worth of screen time here, and I think it's very well served as a series. I think it worked as a series. I don't think it should have been a movie. I don't think there's any wasted screen time. And I think overall it works really well. So, I mean, yes, it's a little crazy. Yes, it's a little out there. It's not a hardcore drama. It's not like grounded in reality. But if you're okay with those things, it's it's a surprisingly good show. I know Andy is not on, and he and I don't always agree on all the stuff that we watch. But I know he really, really enjoyed it too. So I'd 100% recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, that does sound interesting to me. I'm still have a backlog of things to watch. Obviously, like I still haven't watched a bear. I still haven't watched Strange New Worlds. Um, but totally on a random tip, and this is super obscure, but maybe somebody out there is familiar. There's actually a book called Twisted Metal by this sci-fi writer named Tony Valentine, and I just totally like saw it like in a bookstore, and it basically it because I was getting ready to write my own sci-fi novel, which may still be coming. Stay tuned. But I saw this robot on the cover, and it looked really cool. And anyway, it's a trilogy. It's called the Robot Wars Penrose trilogy, and it's Twisted Metal's the first book, Blood and Iron's the second book, and I should turn my phone on silent because that's annoying. And the third book is called Stories from the Northern Road. Anyway, the setup of this is basically there's a planet with robots, not like Transformers, but they're like more humanoid based, and it's actually a really good metaphor for like colonialism, because like when the humans come, like it's a big deal. It's like they have their own kind of like wars going on, but the humans add a certain element to the whole situation. And the story is also told like, you know, past and present, but they don't tell you the flashbacks and the forwards. You just have to figure it out as you go. But man, it was like it totally made an impression, and I definitely want to go back to it. And you know, the producer had in me totally wants to make this, like, people need to know about this, because the storytelling and the world building of this like world was insane. I mean, you know me, like it's brutal. Like the shit that happens between these robots as they're fighting each other, it actually would be so brutal that I don't know if today's society can handle it. But anyway, I bring all of that up to say that like that Twisted Metal, I was kind of hoping it might have been like that, but it wasn't. But yeah, this Twisted Metal came out in 2009. So
Okay.
yeah, so it came, yeah, anyway, totally random. But yeah, no, that I like the 30-minute situation. I love Nev Campbell. I think Anthony Mackie is like also one of those like little engine that could guys. I don't really see him as a leading man, but I feel like they're trying to make him leading man, whether it's Captain America or I guess, is he the leading guy in this show too? Is he
For
the lead?
sure. And I honestly believe he carries the show brilliantly in this.
Okay.
Like there's enough of an ensemble feel to it that he's not necessarily entirely shouldering the load, but
Yeah.
everything is based around him. So
Okay.
everything that's happening, everything that we see is because he is there. You know, he's basically, his character is the best of these drivers. Um, a milkman, that's what they call him. They call him milkman. I can't remember if they say why they're called that, other than they deliver
Deliver.
things, but they call him milkman.
The other show that he did the second season for, and the first season was like better. Altered Carbon. So
Altered Carbon, yeah.
did you watch both seasons or
I did not start the second season. I loved the first season,
yeah.
although to be fair, I had an immense crush on Martha Higarita. She was absolutely gorgeous. But the first season was it Skarsgård?
No, it was some other dude. I
No,
forget
it
his
was no, it was the dude from Joel. Fuck.
Kinnaman, is it? No.
Yes, Joel
Yes.
Kinnaman. Yes, from
Yeah.
RoboCop and
Yeah.
a few other things. But the first season was really good. I actually really liked the first season of Altered Carbon. I did not watch the second season, not for any other reason than I just kind of forgot about it.
Yeah.
It didn't quite grab me in the same way. Um, but but yeah,
But
I
Anthony,
think
I know, was the lead, and I feel like his career kind of took a little bit of a hit because it was almost like, was it because Anthony was the lead this time? Like, I feel like that's why I bring it up.
yeah, it was a show that allowed that to happen because the whole point was your
These,
mind got, you know, revived into an artificial body effectively. So he could be the same character but in a completely different body.
yeah,
um but I don't know what the problem was with season two. To be fair, I do believe it could have been him. I think um he, in a lot of things I've seen, can tend to be a little wooden.
yeah.
uh Definitely not in this. Like, he's so engaging and entertaining and fun. I would like to see more of that. You know, like the best parts of him in the MCU were when he was, you know, bickering with the Winter
First
Soldier, with
Soldier.
yeah. Um like I remember seeing um, Civil War, and they're having that little bitch fest with each other.
Yes.
Either when they're fighting Spider-Man or when they're in the back of the.
There's not
I
supposed to be
think
this much talking.
yeah, and I remember leaving the theater even then and saying they need to make a movie with just those two because they were so fun. And then they did, and they kind of took some of the fun out of it when they did Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They weren't as funny as they could be,
Yeah.
which I think is a little bit of a mistake. But I digress on that. I've talked about it before, but I think Anthony Mackie, after watching this, is definitely better served being allowed to be a little
Yeah.
funnier than dramatic. I think he does it so well in this. I didn't know he had that side to him, and I would love to just see it in kind of everything, almost kind of like that um, Robert Downey Jr. thing, where in everything, in every single movie he did. Yes, there's a lot of impact for Iron Man and everything that he's in, but he's always at least a little funny. And then when he's not, then it's super serious, right? Like in Endgame when he's a total dick when he comes back, you're like,
And in
it's
Oppenheimer, when you
bleak.
see it,
Okay.
when you see Oppenheimer, he's a dick. Just so
But
you know.
yeah, but in the MCU it worked because
Yeah.
he's never like, sure, he's kind of a dick, but he's never not funny. And so when
Don't
he
trust
is not funny,
nothing.
it's super impactful.
Yes.
Um and
You take it.
and
You hide. Sorry, I just had to
yeah, yeah, the whole scene. So but yeah, anyways, go watch Twisted Metal. Really quick too, because you said Strange New Worlds, and I've talked about it like 1,000 times, I feel like now. The this recent season just ended. Ends on a great cliffhanger, so they
I
better get
heard.
another season. They introduce a new old character um, that I did not know was coming, so I don't want to spoil it for anybody else if you haven't seen who it is. Um,
It's got to be Bones.
I will not, neither confirm nor deny. But when he showed up, I was like, "Is that?" And then boom, they said it 2 seconds later, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool." Uh, Pretty obvious, who it is when he shows up. As soon as he opens his mouth, you're like, "Okay, I know exactly who you are." Um, but it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty fun introduction. Definitely not a fun episode. It ends on a dark episode, ends on a heavy cliffhanger. Um, a very Star Trek cliffhanger, and I really hope it gets another season. This has been a really good season, and the way that, especially at the end, the way that it bounced between funny and dramatic, I think was really special. So if
I'm
you like
excited.
Trek at all, man, you should be watching this series. I think more than anything else they're making right now. I did start Discovery, but I kept trying to watch it at night and I kept falling asleep.
Yeah.
It's no knock on Discovery because I know that I like the first season. I've
Wait,
just
wait, wait.
been
Hold on. Did
tired
you start the second season?
of Discovery.
Yeah.
At some
Or the
point I
first?
was watching the episodes from the second season, but it's because I slept through like three of the first. Like I need to go back
Because
and
again, it's those short treks. They're so important. They're world
yeah,
building
like
thing.
I
Yeah.
did not mean to start season two. Like I wasn't there
Okay.
really. I just was. I woke up at one point and it was like the third season or episode of season two. So I need to go back, maybe watch the season one finale at least,
Yes.
then watch those short treks and then start season two,
Yes.
and try to catch it when I'm a little more awake.
Good.
Um, but it was it's good. Discovery is solid too, but Strange New Worlds is just something. It's
Right.
special right now to me. I think they're doing something really cool, and I hope it gets another season. Paramount's being all funky with what they're going to do, and then we've got the writers' strikes and all that. Um, and speaking of Trek, I think I put it in our chat too. It was interesting to see an article where they talked about how Timothy Oliphant was almost cast as Kirk in the J.J. Abrams movies, and I don't think it's a miss. I think Chris Pine was perfect. Like he was awesome, and I can see where Timothy Oliphant was too old for what they were trying to do.
Mhm.
Um, but I would love to see. I was having a discussion about it today, and part of me wants to see a movie or a series or something where they do an older Kirk, and use Timothy Oliphant. But I also actually kind of wouldn't mind something that's even like pre-Enterprise, something really early um, in the Starfleet,
Academy.
early years, not Academy, but just
Oh,
like in the early stages of Earth's activity in Starfleet, and doing that, and make it a wild westish, because that's who he is. I mean, he's always a cowboy. So you can put him as a captain of a ship, but have it be a little more adventurous. He can be a little more of a little,
Maverick.
yeah, and do something like that, because that's what he's great at. If you've never seen Justified, awesome in that. He's so good. And I think that would be fun too. And it would be an opportunity to explore a corner of Star Trek that I don't think has really been explored. So
It's probably like way overdone, but like, obviously I like the dark. So maybe you do Timothy Oliphant as like the Terran Empire version of Kirk or something. Like that'd be kind of cool, right? Because that way
yeah,
he'd be there are less rules. It's like more
yeah, oh yeah,
men
he'd
type
be,
shit.
yeah, he's great though. I love Timothy Oliphant, and what I really like about him is he can do funny really well too. Like he can actually be hilarious. The Santa Clarita Diet was a fun show with him and Drew Barrymore over on Netflix. That should have got a second season. That one got kind of screwed. But
Speaking of diet, uh
yeah, what a perfect
diet.
transition, because I was just going to try and figure out which one of your shows to talk about. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
So basically, it's interstitial shit for me these days. So I will go to Netflix to watch something and then it'll just serve something to me. So I'm really starting to like AI and the algorithm. I'm not scared of it. It serves me things that I like. Get it? Serve food. So anyway, I was shown this Netflix food documentary that is basically called Poisoned: The Dirty Truth About Your Food. And basically, before I even refer to the notes, I'm just going to freestyle a second for a bit. Let's rewind back to 2004. I still have a girlfriend, sort of. And she's all about that whole paycheck, AKA Whole Foods. She's all about, oh, if you can't pronounce it, it's bad for you. Like
Yep.
if it's not natural, it's not good for you. And my retort was always cancer is natural. All these diseases are natural. Okay. So just because something is natural does not mean it's good. I've already lost like half the fucking listeners. They're like, fuck him. Anyway, here's the thing. Okay. So I already knew. I remember eating like salad and then getting a sore throat afterwards. And she'd be like, it's all in your head. I've noticed every single time I eat like fresh, like vegetables that are not cooked in any way, there's always some sort of consequence, usually sore throat, maybe a cold, like sniffles, whatever. I know it's weird, but like basically my hypothesis was, look, if you can cook your food, whatever's in there, it's killed. Okay. But if you can't cook it and it's just fresh and you have to trust the farm, you are rolling the dice. And I still think to this day, most people don't get that. They just go, oh, I can't pronounce it. It's bad for me. But this is organic. Shit is organic. Okay. Like that doesn't mean anything. Anyway, so this documentary proceeds to like basically start off with um, E. coli and salmonella, I'd say, are the two bacteria that are the stars of the show. And of course, there's different strains of E. coli and different strains of salmonella. Okay. So not all of them are going to fuck you up. As a matter of fact, I think E. coli lives in our digestive tracts, but not the kind that fucks you up. Anyway, so back in 1993, and I totally forgot about this, but apparently I remember now because I remember being scared of Jack in the Crack, aka Jack in the Box, for all you Californians. Jack in the Box had this huge like E. coli
Yes.
outbreak.
Yes.
And I think it was in the Northwest, actually, from what I remember. And people died. And apparently,
Mhm.
like an E. coli death is terrible. It's like your body is being eaten away from the inside. It's terrible. And it was because they weren't cooking their burgers properly. So in the documentary, they follow this one lawyer who's just like fresh out of law school who decides to take this case on after seeing like one of the kids who actually died. Like he went to the hospital and the kid died later, and made it his mission to kind of like, argue these cases to get change to happen. And guess what? Like they actually were able to get legislation to remove, like basically screen for E. coli in the meat industry and in the ground beef industry, and then also make sure that they enforce that these burgers are being cooked to a certain temperature. So
Okay.
after all this legislation, like as far as like E. coli shit, it's gone to like zero when it comes to like meat. Okay, but now you know, E. coli still popped up, but it was popping up in like leafy greens, like spinach and like salads, you know? And the reason being, I am so proud of myself for remembering all this because I just wanted to get this out there, okay? Is because the irrigation systems that water all these plants on the farms are very close to the feeding areas where all the cattle are. So the cattle are munch, 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 shit, shit, shit. And then the fucking shit gets into the ground near the water. It gets in the water. The water gets sprinkled all over the fucking leafy greens, and then it's plucked up, put in bags, and given to over human consumption. And then some humans don't even wash their fucking shit. They just fucking take the bag and eat it. And then, of course, they get sick and fucking die, or dialysis for the rest of their lives. It's not funny, but it's like, and then here's the thing, right? Because I, as you guys know, like for some reason have a bit of a lean towards like oversight. Like I'm not Mr. No, you don't tread on me. I'm like, no, you need oversight because like y'all motherfuckers don't know what you're doing, right? So basically, this documentary is like pointing the finger at the FDA and the USDA. They're like, you guys aren't doing your jobs, right? But the fact of the matter is, in the case of these firms where the shit water is getting into the vegetation, the federal government doesn't have jurisdiction on how farms run their shit. So basically, the only place they can actually impact is once like it gets to a plant and they like kind of inspect it. But as far as the farm practices, can't do shit because I guess it's like don't tread on my rights, right? So you know, well, duh. Well, then that's that, you know. And then as far as like they actually talk about like you know people are always talking about meat and like you know the factory packaged stuff. And they were all saying no. The most dangerous part of this grocery store is actually the perimeter, which is of course where all your fresh fruit and vegetables are. I've always known this instinctively, okay? Because again, I'm all about if you can't cook it, it's probably like your Russian roulette. So again, people listening, our heads are exploding, and like Andrew, what are you talking about? And I'm saying I've been justified, man. So hey, ex-girlfriend, I know you might be listening out there. I was right. Anyways, so now I'm gonna keep going. So uh after they talk about the E. coli getting into the leafy greens and stuff, then they go into salmonella and chicken. Okay. Now, this is where my eyes roll all the way back to my head. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you a question. This is just, there's no right answer to this, right? But if you have raw chicken, okay, from the grocery store, like in your opinion, what are the chances there are salmonella in that chicken? I'm asking that.
Well, I mean, I lately I think I've heard it more the concern more about eggs than chicken, but I mean, I would assume it's still pretty high if the chicken's raw.
Exactly. So, right. So why the fuck are these people going, you can't have salmonella in the chicken. You need to like screen because you shouldn't have it. Motherfucker, it's raw chicken. It's gonna have salmonella. Cook your shit, okay? If you get sick off of it because you didn't cook it properly, it's the same thing I have with the social dilemma. It's like social media is not the problem. It's your use of it that's the problem, okay? It's like don't blame the tool. And I say don't blame the food, blame how you're cooking it, okay? Now, there was one thing that made me a little less eye rolly, which is they're like in Europe, there is no salmonella in their chicken, okay? But at one point, and they gloss over it, they're like, they made legislation, they screen for it, they vaccinate the chickens against that salmonella, and that's where I was like, pause. Nope, nope, you can't just like say that and keep moving. No, Americans, the moment you talk about vaccinating anything,
They're
we
gonna lose their
fucking
shit.
lose our thank you. So you can't just say, oh, you know, if we told Americans we're vaccinating our fucking chickens against salmonella, we would lose our shit. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't tell me, sorry, it's a Madonna song. Don't tell me that it's so fucking easy for the government to like get on their business. And dude, it's a farm. There are thousands of chicken carcasses going through. Cook your shit. Then they have the audacity to talk about how easy it is to contaminate your home. Okay, so they run through this thing about I take the raw chicken, I cut it up, and then I touch this, I touch that, I touch this, and the whole time I'm like, if you wash your hands, you wouldn't be touching anything. Okay.
Yeah.
When I'm handling raw, which is why I brought this up on a few podcasts ago, or maybe no, it was one of our group chats. I talked about some movie where there was a woman who was like had some raw meat and she was like cutting it and then like picking up the phone and handling everything after touching the raw meat. And like, and this is why you motherfuckers get sick. Like I'm all about control the controllables, and these motherfuckers are not controlling their controllables. They're not. Then they're getting sick and then wanting to blame the system. And I'm just kind of like, stop it. We're a bunch of fucking victims. And, you know, the only thing I will say, I am in such rant mode, is that, you know, if you have high anxiety and mistrust of like the government and whatever, then this fucking shit is for you, you know? But for me, it is alarmist. It is so like for the weak. Like, I just stop it. Like, go to fucking some developing country and try your shit there and then like shit your brains out afterwards. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's not that bad. But if you insist on eating, and they call it out, cantaloupe, because apparently it's hard to wash the outside of a cantaloupe. So when you cut it, the shit from the outside is going to get in the inside. If you eat Brussels sprouts, you're rolling the dice. Romaine lettuce apparently even is like fucking risky. Like, buy your own head, wash it. But as far as eating public romaine lettuce, maybe not. You know, like when I go to Taco Bell, I say no lettuce. I'm sorry. Like, you know, and it's like I control my controllables. So I don't think it's that bad, and it'd be better to just be informed. I ranted a lot. So talk if you want to.
Well, let me tell you this: as somebody that worked in the restaurant industry for a long time, at one point I was doing a little management, and one of the things that I had to do was go to a food safety class. And they go over this stuff big time, like not to probably to the degree that this show does, because it is in fact trying to, you know, wake you up, right? Like, so they're going to hit you in the face with stuff that is probably a little more extreme than the truth to a degree. But you know, when you're working in the food industry, they talk about, you stack your food in the cooler a certain way. Chicken's always on the bottom, and then meat above the chicken, and then your vegetables and things like that. So if a container leaks or something like that, it's the least damaging thing as it goes down the stack. They talk about food temperatures. You know, chicken is not safe until you cook it to 185 or something like that. So there's certain temperatures, like you can do a moist chicken, but if the center of it's not cooked to a certain temperature, you haven't killed the E. coli. They go as far as what temperature your dishwasher has to be at, because if you put your dishes in there and it's not hot enough, it's not going to kill the bacteria. So if you've ever seen like a professional dishwasher, it's this big thing, and you crank it down and it can wash your dishes in like 30 seconds to a minute, but it's like hitting them with a blowtorch. Like, it cooks the shit out of it. So there's a lot of stuff like that. The other thing that I always think about, we talked about, I think last week, how the reality shows that I watch are cooking shows. And I watch a lot of Gordon Ramsay shows. One thing he is adamant about, and just like borderline psychopath about, is do not undercook your chicken. Like, especially if it's one thing if you're doing one of the shows where it's just kind of a compact cooking show where you're making a meal and then they judge it and that's it. Like, he'll get mad if it's underdone. If it's one where you're out in public, where you're serving actual people and you undercook it, he will lose his shit. He's like, are you trying to kill people? Like, and maybe he's overselling it a little bit, but part of it is also that his name is on that thing that you're doing, right? And that's a side thing. That's always what has made me like him more as the longer I've seen him. A lot of people always think of like the Hell's Kitchen Gordon Ramsay, where he's just screaming at people all the time.
Yeah.
But the more you watch him, the more you realize that he really respects his craft. Like, this is the thing that he does. And if you're going to do it with his name on it, you're damn well going to do it the best you possibly can, even in a competition show where you're a total amateur. So those things are critically important to him. And there's another show that he did that I only watched a few of, but I didn't hate it. But it was called Kitchen Nightmares. And the idea was he would go into a failing restaurant, like privately owned restaurant, go in and help them kind of revive their restaurant. He would do an overnight makeover of the restaurant, help them fix their menu, all this stuff. But like some of the walk-ins and the things that he walked into were just terrible, and he would just, I mean, lose it. And so, it's the food world is a sketchy place. It's a little scary because we, as an industry, they just kind of crank things out. And if it's not somewhere that the standards are higher, yeah, it's scary. So there are a lot of things that you have to be cautious about. But again, if you're cautious about it and you do it right, it's not really a big deal. So like you said, chicken is not bad. Like chicken's easy. You cook it and you're good. Like, like you're not going to get sick from that. But at the same time, if you are prepping chicken, they always say you should have a chicken cutting board and knife. You should have a meat cutting board and knife, and then a cutting board and knife that's just for your vegetables, because you don't want to cross contaminate anything. That's the
No, and
biggest
you
thing.
think
Just
that's common sense, but
be
apparently it's
cautious.
not.
It's not, and it should be. Like, it's really obvious if you just use your fucking head, but if you don't, then it's, that's less obvious. But I don't know. It's a weird world out there that people aren't very smart sometimes, um, but yeah, food safety isn't that complicated. And especially in the internet age, if you are cooking for yourself, if you're getting food, just Google your temperatures, Google the things that you need to know, and you'll probably be fine.
Yeah. And like I actually have a phrase in my head: when in doubt, throw it out. Like I really do buy that. And it's like I do. And like I don't care. Like like just being double spigot life, if you guys feel me on that, like where you're doing it from both ends and you have to decide which one you we're gonna do because
Yeah.
they're both coming. Like that's not where you want to be. It's not worth it. Um, so there's one also I forgot to mention. There was a peanut butter salmonella situation, and the dude who was in charge went to jail for 29 years.
Oh
So
shit.
for me, it's like good. Like you knowingly like, and they actually had like a paper trail of all the warnings that his people were saying, yo, dude, like this isn't cool. And he's like, I don't care, keep shipping it. Or they forge, like the regulatory shit saying it's okay, there's no salmonella. People died, so it's like I just, I hate alarmist shit. I really do, because I think you're just whatever. I get it. You're just trying to get the streaming like equivalent of clicks. Now, one thing I will say, I don't know if you're big into politics in Connecticut, but there was a blue-haired representative by the name of Rosa DeLauro. Okay, and apparently she's 80 years old, but she is definitely what I would call a textbook INFJ. She was, and she basically is the leading food safety person in Congress. But her whole vibe, again, she had blue hair, dude, and like she had all this like kind of like, you can imagine, you can smell the patchouli or the incense in her fucking office. She had all these rings and they'd clack like when she like was talking and everything. And I was just, on one hand, I'm like, yo, dude, like you're part of you know, the panic machine. But at the same time, I respect her gangster enough to look her up and be like, you know what? Yes, I'm slightly like kind of like, yo, like what's up with you, right? But at the same time, I'm like, no, you made an impression on me, and I think you have a good heart, even if I think that you're a little too scaredy cat about this shit. But anyway, and apparently also I'm digressing, but like she's a true like lefty liberal, like she like testified to make like Negro spirituals like a national treasure. Like she's just all about that life. She's Catholic. She married a Jewish guy. Like anyway, she seems really fucking cool. Anyway, so the documentary has really cool, I think, personalities who are talking about this whole thing. What blows my mind though is, like Leah said, not everyone should watch this. I don't get the ostrich mentality. Like I know there's people. I get it. I know you don't want your food ruined. I'm not calling you an ostrich, okay? But I don't get like sticking your head in the sand because you're gonna be like, you can't expose your shit. I get what you're saying. Like you just don't want your fucking like whatever. Yeah, you don't want to ruin that. But I'm more talking about people who might be like triggered or like actually be catatonic about this. Like it's okay. If you want to move to Europe and have vaccinated chicken, go ahead and have vaccinated chicken, okay? But like, just again, like you were saying, cook your chicken. Like I assume all chicken has salmonella. I don't care. I assume all eggs have salmonella. That's how I was raised. Okay. So the fact that only 29% of per chicken had salmonella and they treat it like a damning statistic, and I treat it like so, I'm cooking it.
Yeah.
Stop the madness. So that's my review of this thing. And I'll keep on the lookout because I think Netflix keeps on serving me cool documentaries now. So
Yeah, Netflix has you figured out because you're on that train right now, man.
yes.
You're watching. See, just to make a perfectly smooth transition again, Netflix, on the other hand, for me is just feeding me stuff that is action oriented and less I don't know, less amazing than probably other stuff that's out there right now. Um, right now, the show that Netflix, or the movie that Netflix is hyping, is their brand new Gal Gadot action film, Heart of Stone. And so I watched I watched it last night, fell asleep because I was tired, started watching it tonight, fell asleep because I was tired. So I don't want to entirely blame the show or the movie. Um, it's a weird thing because it fits into this kind of Mission Impossible vein, and the idea behind this show, it opens up on the scene where um, this group of, I don't know, four MI6 agents are trying to gather information from this guy. They don't really say what they're trying to get or whatever, but they're going on this mission and things kind of go sideways. And Gal Gadot is the girl in the box, right? Like she's in the van. She's obviously the smart person behind the scenes. They talk about how she's never been out in the field and they don't want to send her out or whatever. And then they ultimately, something goes sideways and they need her to hack somebody's phone, so they do send her out in the field. um and she's like, oh, playing the fool card a little bit, and then somebody's in her ear and things kind of go sideways, and she starts kicking ass like left and right, and this person's like, don't blow your cover, don't blow your cover. And it's a little vague and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, come to find out as this opening scene progresses, that she is part of a group called um oh shit, the Charter. She's part of this group called Charter, which is like IMF, right? If you're thinking of Mission Impossible. So they're this like super espionage agency that then placed her in MI6 to make sure that things go right. Like that's
Oh,
her
yeah.
whole gig, right?
Yeah.
And her name is, I think it's Rebecca Stone, I think is what it is. Rachel Stone. So her name is Stone. Let's get that right because the movie's called Heart of Stone. Uh, she works for the Charter. The Charter has this AI that is supposed to be so advanced that it's taking information from everybody all the time, taking camera footage, your passwords, everything. And it's so smart that it can almost predict the future. Like that's how good it is at its algorithm. It's not like an AI that is taking things over. It's just an AI that is processing information really well. So it's not like it's not fear of AI taking over. That's not the point of the show. It's still being run by human beings, which is arguably scarier than AI taking over because humans are idiots. But so everything continues along. She comes across the bad guys. They know about this program, which is called the Heart, hence the show Heart of Stone. Um, I really wish they'd come up with a better name because as soon as you put those two together, you're like, oh my god. But um, but it's okay. Like it, Jamie Dornan is kind of the man of the show. If you or movie, I keep saying show, but movie. He's 50 Shades of Grey guy.
Okay.
I feel like in this, he, because I've seen him in The Fall also, which is a great British drama with him and Gillian Anderson. He, to me, is more manly in this than he has been in everything. Like he gained some weight. He's not quite as lean. Still a good looking guy, but he's like, I mean, he's bigger. Like he looks more grown up anyways. And he's good. Like he's fine in it. Everybody in it is just fine. The Rotten Tomatoes score on this is like super low. I want to say it's like a 32% or something like that. Like it got absolutely bombed, but the audience score is quite a bit better. Yeah, the critic score is 30%. The audience score is 62%. So it's not killing it, but there's a big difference here. I'm going to say in this one, kind of the opposite of Twisted Metal, I lean a little more towards the critics. I think the issues that it has are valid issues. It is an action movie, and they put as much action in it as they can in there because the character development is weak. The story is okay. There's nothing particularly impressive about it other than the action. Like nobody is bad in it, but nobody's really great in it. Like nobody's stealing the scene. And so like they just pump action scene after action scene. And there's no like crazy wild action scene either. Like I've been watching the Fast and the Furious movies. Me and my kids just started, or about 2/3 of the way through Fast 7 now, or
Oh, wow.
sorry, Furious 7, if I want to get it right. And that one has crazy fucking action scenes. Like they're, for what they are, they're great. This one, they literally drive a car from 2 different towers in Abu Dhabi, like from like the penthouse through the air into another building, through the air into another building. It's ridiculous, but it's exciting, right? Like it's crazy and over the top and whatever. There's no action sequences that really steal that. Like there's a scene where she's fighting Jamie Dornan's character in this thing, and then it explodes and she's got to run and jump off, but like the explosion is like 5 seconds. The fight is just a fist fight. Most of the fights are just fist fights, which is great. They're very grounded, but you don't have that really super impressive moment that's really kind of where you're like, oh, that's amazing. Like if you watch Mission Impossible, they're relatively grounded for what they are, but Tom's always doing something fucking crazy, and this just doesn't really have that. And or the things that probably should be more impressive, like there's one where she jumps out of a plane and she's got the like the flying suit, where you go like flying squirrel. And she does some crazy stuff, but it's over like that. And it's just not, and it's kind of dark, and it doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't have the big action feel that something like Mission Impossible has. And I know that at this point, especially having seen her play Wonder Woman and do other stuff, I know that Gal is a badass. She's from Israel. She trained, because everybody in Israel
2 years.
is in the military. So like she can actually kick ass, which I've always criticized her as Wonder Woman because I don't think she's physically imposing enough as Wonder Woman. But I do believe that she can fight. Like I do believe that she is tough. She's just so tiny.
Right.
In this, yes, she's small, but because it's a little more real worldy, that's not as doesn't bother me as much as Wonder Woman does. But I mean, all in all, it's fine. It might get a sequel. I don't know what numbers it's actually getting on Netflix, because as the whole actor strike is going on, we know that they'll say whatever they want for their numbers and not release anything that is an actual account of what's being watched. So we'll see what happens with the sequel. I know she's open to doing one. Like I just saw an interview with her. And she enjoyed doing it, and it's fine. The problem is if she enjoyed doing it, there's a lack of joy in it. Like it doesn't feel like it was made with love. Like Tom Cruise makes the Mission Impossible movies, he'd love doing those. Like he does projects that he loves. And I'm not trying to compare Gal Gadot and Tom Cruise. He's had a fucking insane career that I don't know that anybody's going to match for a long time.
Yeah.
But when he makes things with passion, and he brings people in that has that same passion. And this was made to be an action movie, and that's kind of it. It reminds me of like the earlier Fast and Furious movies, where they're trying to be dramatic and they're trying to make an action movie, um, and they kind of lack the just at least that little bit of ridiculousness that makes them more fun. Like I said, there's not a lot of fun in it, but it's not, you don't care about any of the characters enough for it to be as dramatic as it is. So, I wouldn't say don't watch it, but if you do watch it, go in with lower expectations. I mean, if you're really looking for something good, I think you'll burn out on it before you get too far into it.
I'm gonna tangent, but they have lines to this film, and the first one where you were talking about action films that is like action scenes that stand out that really just kind of like become showpieces. And the first one I always go to, and I still think it aged well, was the rescue of Morpheus in the first Matrix. Because I mean, even though those effects, like that whole gun shootout in the lobby, doesn't isn't as impressive as it used to be now. But when like like Morpheus jumps out of the building, Neo catches him. Then like they're flying in the helicopter, and they're both hanging on the ladder, and then the helicopter, she lands them on the roof. The helicopter then proceeds to almost crash into the building, and he's like, Trinity, and he basically just knows to latch onto the rope, and then she jumps onto the other rope, jumps off the helicopter, and then his legs, like he's like, it's like sliding, and he actually like his legs hit the ledge, and then he just holds on to her, and then like she just springs into the window. I'm sorry, thank you for like letting me relive this. Like that to me was like holy shit. And then of course I think Tank's go, he's the one. Like that was a great action scene. Okay, and I feel like that's almost like down to maybe the choreographers. And I also wonder why the hell didn't they have that in the last Matrix? I forget what it was called, but either way, it's like that last Matrix didn't really have any of those scenes, whereas 1, 2, and 3 actually had some pretty epic scenes. The Neo Smith fight at the end was pretty fucking dope. Anyway, that's number one. Number two, how about Gal Gadot coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, Peter Safran," you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
They said I was
somebody's full of
fine.
shit. Somebody's full of shit, and I don't know who it is, because that one's complicated, because I don't think she would be full of shit, but at the same time, I don't think Gunn would be full of shit. It's like somebody's signals got crossed, and everybody just went all in on their answer, right? Or both sides went all in on their like side of the story, because like holy shit, that's the biggest fucking moth I've ever seen. There, yeah, like somebody's wrong. Like she came out and said, "Oh, we're definitely doing Wonder Woman 3. I'm gonna do it with Safran and Gunn. They both said we're doing this." Like her words are, "We are 100% making Wonder Woman 3 with these people." And then this comes out, the Safran and Gunn are like, "No, dog, we didn't say that." And you're like, okay. Because number one, because if like we talked about it in our chat, and I I'm like, they need to let it go. Whether she was perfect as Wonder Woman, whatever, tying themselves into anything from the old DC EU does them no favors. It creates expectations, and it ties all the negativity from the DCEU, whatever that is, whether you love the Snyderverse or not, there are hardcore assenters and dissenters on both sides of this story, right? And if you bring that over, you bring that same argument over. It sounds like from everything that I'm reading, that Blue Beetle is kind of walking that line between the two. But it almost sounds like it doesn't have to. It's getting a lot of comparisons to Spider-Man and Iron Man from the people that I'm seeing. It's a lot of heart. A very compact story, very
Good.
compact cast of characters. I think that it's not going to do as well as it probably should, um, because I feel like it's still in that range
No man's
where
land.
they should have held it for a year. They should have released Aquaman this year, just get that shit out of there, release whatever they need to, because it seems like it's at least that open door into the DCU, because they're saying that he is going to carry over into the DCU. Why not? They should have just waited. Like, it's too late now. It's coming out next week. And it's going to do what it's going to do. Um, but I hope it does well. It seems like it's going to be good. I don't think my kids are interested in seeing it, so I probably won't see it in the theater. Um, and I think it's just confusing as to where it sits, because they are going to release Aquaman, which is the DCEU's Aquaman, and then on top of that, there's all these rumors that they still want Momoa to play somebody else in the DCU. So like, it's just confusing. Like, they I would like to have seen them take a year off before they start putting things out that are going to be in their
Yeah.
universe. But with the whole Gal thing, whoops. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know who on what side, so we'll see. But I'm actually glad to hear that they're not making a Wonder Woman 3. Number one, because I didn't think Wonder Woman 84 was very good, but more to the point that I think they just need to close the door on all of the old stuff and start fresh from their own stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And having seen the Flash, like to me, that for me, that was the end. Like in my head canon, it's the end. We'll see what Aquaman does, but I felt like it was, I know, right? I felt like that was a satisfying end to it. Shall I go Dictatorland?
yeah. Go teach us how to be a
Tyrant.
tyrant.
All right. So again, the algorithm I have to thank. So your boy Tyrion Lannister, aka Peter Dinklage, came back into my life to basically narrate how to become a tyrant. And just like the first one, although I honestly think the subjects were more consistently interesting, I would say the first probably two episodes are the best. You can obviously guess who the first one they're going to talk about is on the first episode. So the first episode was basically the theme was seize power, and basically it's all about Adolf Hitler.
Oh,
And
okay.
all these shows, they actually do bring up things that you didn't know. Like I didn't some of the things that he talked about in terms of his rise and how he came to power. I wasn't aware of all that, so it was kind of a trip to watch this dude rise. One thing that wasn't featured in the first episode, but apparently was featured in one of the later ones, was did you know that the Nazi regime like banned smoking? Like they were anti-smoking? Isn't that
Hmm.
weird?
That is weird.
Not only were they
I know they did some crazy stuff. Like, it was definitely like when you're sitting on the outside, and it doesn't feel right to say this. Um, but there were a lot of like positive things that they did. Like, obviously they did some of the worst things in fucking human history, and I'm not saying that the Nazi Party was a bunch of good dudes. Um, but they did some things that were, if nothing else, ahead of their time. Like, and that doesn't surprise me that they banned smoking, because he was so crazy that if he hated something, he was like, nobody should do this, and they're like, oh, okay. So,
yes, personal distaste for tobacco, huge animal lover. Like he was all about animal rights.
and an artist, like, it's crazy, right? But
And the Autobahn, and then like even the Volkswagen being the car of the people, and then of course when you talk about looking good, like seizing power, like Hugo Boss was like the designer of the outfits and everything. The symbol, the swastika, like in terms of just like that was something to this day is probably like the most like recognizable like logo like in the world, like crazy.
and it
Anyway,
wasn't even theirs. Like, this
yeah,
it's been around for centuries as a much more positive
yeah,
symbol, and he totally ruined it for everybody that's ever used it.
correct. So I'm already forgetting shit, but that was like the first episode, but there was more cooler shit than that. Then the second episode was about crush your rivals. And man, Saddam or Saddam Hussein, a lot I didn't even know about. Now they didn't even talk about him gassing the Kurds because apparently that I knew about that, but they didn't talk about that. They just talked more about how he came to power and how brutal he was in terms of like killing motherfuckers, like even his own fucking son-in-laws. Like that was insane. Like apparently, like his son-in-law and daughters fled the country because they were like, yeah, he's fucking crazy. And then he had his people go, no, it's okay, come back, we'll forgive you. Dumb motherfuckers came back. Sorry, it's not funny. And he killed them. Like, what the fuck? And I think that sent the message to like everyone, like Saddam don't play. He doesn't care if your family, you've been in the family for like decades or like whatever, like you're married to his kids, he'll kill you. Like he was a bad motherfucker. So there's a lot I learned about Saddam that I just did not know. But anyways, so then,
Well,
and
I
that's
think with
cluster
him
rock.
too, before you get there, I think
Yeah,
with him, because we beat him and because his fall was kind of embarrassing, right? Like we ultimately found him like a hobo in a fucking bunker, right? I think people forget how bad he was.
you're right.
You know, obviously he was not as bad as Hitler, but like we kind of just look at him like, oh, bad grandpa, like he was over there. He was a bad fucking guy.
He really was. And when you watch the documentary, you're like, yeah, no, he got but you're right. Like towards the end, he was just all in his suit, like looking like whatever. But Americans, like when you piss us off, we'll come get you. And that was totally just like revenge. I think that was like oil. And then of course, like you humiliated my dad. So my dad's gonna come like the wrath of fucking Bush Senior is coming for you. The third one reigned through. So that was crush your rivals. So seize power, Hitler. Crush your rivals, Saddam. Reigned through terror. Did you ever see the movie The Last King of Scotland?
No, but that was with Crazy Eyes,
McAvoy.
right? Um,
Yes, Crazy Eyes and James McAvoy. Fucking. Oh my God,
why
why?
can I remember his name? I can picture him in everything he's ever done.
Oh,
Um,
he actually. Well, I think he won the Oscar for that.
yes, he did.
Shit. Why are we? This is so embarrassing. Like, we need to know his name. Hold on a second. This is ridiculous. Um, Last King of Scotland. Oh shit. Forrest Whitaker. Okay,
Yeah, we
so
we we have
Forrest.
to edit that out. I can't look like such a moron.
So anyway, so it's Idi Amin in Uganda, and man, that dude, like, yes, brutal motherfucker. Like, he was a butcher, and of course, why is like sub-Saharan Africa obsessed with hacking people's limbs off? Like that's what they do. So like, well, yeah, dude, like, so that's a fucked up way to die. And like he was all about that life, dude. So he basically was just that he was like an evil notorious big. Like he was a big dude. He was like jolly and like he looked like a big teddy bear, but you knew that like he is absolutely ruthless. Like, and he has reigned through terror. Like people were scared of him. And where he fucked up was he then tried to invade another country, but because like his army was really just a bunch of thugs who were used to kind of fucking up his own people and not actually being organized and attacking other countries, that I think it was Zambia, they fucked him up. And once they fucked him up, then his rule was like it was almost only a matter of time before he was deposed. So that was the third one. The fourth one is control the truth. And that was Joseph Stalin. And I gotta
Oh, okay.
say, like, he was a bastard too. Like, I mean, in terms of like his people starving to death, and and basically like he was very like if the science didn't support what he believed, he would suppress it, and he put other people in power or a chief scientist who thought that he could like grow crops a certain way, and he was totally wrong, and that's why they had famine. But famine can be good for you because if the people are too hungry, they can't rise and rebel, so they're controllable. But Stalin, the one thing that he did do was he did take like Russia from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse, but he did it at the expense of millions of people. He also, one of the cool things was he like was one of Lenin's like, like chief, like whatever, like he was like the heir apparent to Lenin, but even Lenin was like, yo, this motherfucker's crazy. Like he's too mean, but Stalin's like, fuck that. So basically, after Lenin died, he actually like made sure to like have a picture of him and Lenin, and they say it was like the first Photoshop ever where they made Stalin look bigger and they moved him closer to Lenin in the picture to be buddies because Lenin obviously was a big deal. But yeah, Stalin was a bastard, he really was, and like I just, yeah.
He's like the opposite of Saddam. Like we know, like through history, we know that um that Stalin sucked, right? Like we get that he was a bad guy, but we don't necessarily remember the bad things that he did, right? Whereas like Saddam, we were there for the bad things he does, and we just kind of like sweep it under the rug because
And and,
evil
and I,
grandpa.
I don't think it would, yeah. And I also don't think that like his shit was publicized. So I like these documentaries because a lot of what's being told, I don't think the general public really knew. I mean, I didn't know Uday and Kusei were bastards too. And they don't
Hmm.
cover everything. Because I do remember even during that second Gulf War when they found them and killed them, like they didn't cover that in the documentary, but I remember hearing about Uday and Kusei fucking Hussein. So I know people named Uday, and I'm almost like Air Indian. And it sucks because whenever I hear that name, I think of like, the Husseins and are you evil? Like, no. Anyways, moving right along. That was weird. But I always say weird shit in the show. After that, there's Create a New Society, and that's Muammar Gaddafi. Now, I from Libya. Now, I also was surprised they didn't cover the Lockerbie incident. So Lockerbie, I know, was like this terrorist situation where a plane exploded over Scotland, and that was a terrorist attack. That was, I think, that was connected to fucking Gaddafi. I also remember the Libyans from, of course, Back to the Future, but they didn't talk about that either. But that's fictional. But no, this guy was a Bedouin. Like he basically, and Bedouin apparently is like a nomadic, so they're very poor. Libya was a really poor country. He joined the army, and then rose, and then basically started his dictatorship. One of the things that he did do was start this like irrigation situation for the people. He discovered like a water table under the desert, so he like started this whole thing, and the people liked him for that shit, and that's cool. But then he was also about like equal rights for women. So he actually had this like Amazonian guard, aka the Libyan Dora Milaje. But the kind of icky thing, and it's you already know where I'm going with this, is like apparently it was his own personal fucking harem too. And I noticed that because when you watch some of the soldiers, yeah, some of them were a little butchy, right? But some of them were like, like, so I definitely like, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like he definitely like had his eye out. But what's crazy about Gaddafi's situation is he reigned for like a long time. I want to say like 40 something years, which is much longer than at all for, I think Idi Amin was only there for like 8 years, like, and Saddam, like 20 something years, whatever. But anyway, where he fucked up. Okay. So two things. The US bombed his country twice. And after the second time, he tried to be all reform and like, okay, we're going to now like have free speech and whatever. Like he has tried to be more Western. Okay. But the problem is after you've done all that shit and then you try to change up, the people see you as weak now. So eventually they rose up, fucking tracked him down and killed his ass. So basically, you have to stay the course. If you're going to be a fucking tyrant, you can't switch it up in the ninth inning. You have to keep on ruling with an iron fist. Like choose your bed and lie in it. And that's why I watched that shit. I learned, yeah, dude, don't switch up. Like I'm not saying to be a tyrant, but I'm just saying like if I'm gonna choose a certain lane, I'm gonna stay in that lane. And if I get out of that lane, then I'm getting out of the fucking country, period. Because fuck that. Now, finally, and this is the weird part, okay? Now remember the dude from the first one, the cult leader was like from Korea and he won basically because he
Oh
said
yeah.
he's like, okay, well check this out. Yet another Korean won, and this motherfucker was rule forever, and it was Kim Il Sung. So once Kim Il Sung took over after World War II, and this is cool because I knew North and South Korea were always communist versus non-communist, whatever, right? But apparently the Russians and the Chinese, but really the Russians were the ones who kind of helped liberate Korea from Japan from the north, and the U.S. helped liberate Korea from Japan from the south, and that's how we became North and South Korea. So Kim Il Sung started this whole philosophy, I forget what it was called, but it was very self-reliant, and he basically built this cult of personality around being divine. Then his son, his second, no, it was his firstborn, shit, I don't even remember. It's one, maybe it's the second. Anyway, there was a rivalry in terms of who was going to succeed, but Kim Sung Il, yeah, I think Kim Jong Il, or whatever. The second one took over, basically being like a propaganda minister and like controlling the film industry. And then, of course, his third one, the son, is now, of course, is in power. So basically, why is it that in both situations, the Korean motherfuckers, whether you're a tyrant or a cult leader, like figured out the family shit to make your shit eternal? Like, that's interesting. You just want to start a dynasty. So I just found it super interesting. I keep saying interesting. Can I say interesting again? Like, interesting.
Say it until it becomes not a word.
Right. But yeah, no, I found it a very satisfying watch in general. So they didn't have like a weird guy who was like a porn star and had people get plastic surgery. Like, that was there was no weak links, I think, in this one. So I think all in all, this was actually the better series of the two.
Was it the first one? Did this come before?
I do not even know, man. I don't know. But it just, yeah, if you're a student of human psychology and people, I definitely recommend it. I mean, again, what's his name? Dinklage is sarcastic as ever. They definitely kind of like guide you and encourage you to like become a fucking tyrant.
A tyrant.
And then like some guys like, as far as, who can become a tyrant, the answer is depressing, but anybody, and I don't believe that. I think there's people who are way too,
there's some,
you could not become a tyrant.
Yeah, there's some things that some key factors that have to be in place first, right? Like, you can't just take over a country. You got to have something behind
But
you.
this playbook is amazing, and I do think I think, well, especially I think being a tyrant is worse than being a cult leader, because at least with a cult leader, you don't have to kill anybody, right? Not really, but like,
although that dude did.
No, fuck that. The fucking Om Shinriko guy, the fucking, like, yeah, fuck him, right? But like, Nexium didn't kill anybody. So what I'm saying is, but to become like a legit like dictator, you have to have no scruples about killing. Like, you have to kill people to like make a point, because the moment you show weakness or leave someone like your rivals alive, you're done. So yeah, dude, if I were to become a tyrant, I'm Catholic, or I was raised Catholic, I'm going to hell. Sorry. Like, I just know that the fires are waiting for me. Like, I mean, I don't care if that makes me sound old fashioned, whatever, but like, I'm going to hell. Fuck it. Like, I'm going to hell. So I would never do it. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why I wouldn't do it, but it's mostly a reason. No, I'm joking. Anyway, watch How to Become a Tyrant on Netflix. I'm a nice guy, really. If you know me, I'm a nice guy.
That's what he says, everybody. That's what he says. Cool. The only other thing that I've got really quick, and I only just started it, but it's off to a hot start. If you have Paramount Plus, there's a show called The Lioness, starring Zoe Saldana. It's got Nicole Kidman. It's got Morgan Freeman and a few other familiar faces. Jill Wagner, who I adore. There was a game show on a million years ago called Wipeout, and it was an obstacle course game show that was just ridiculous and funny, and they had great announcers that made it ridiculous and funny. She was one of the co-hosts in the early season, and she was in the Blade TV show. She's in it, but it's by the guy that did Yellowstone and those shows, Tyler Sheridan, who is right now, he's like
Shonda Rhimes.
Exactly. I was gonna say, like, the white, like, dark Shonda Rhimes. Like, he's doing kind of angrier stuff. Like, Shonda Rhimes stuff is very it's dramatic or whatever, but it's not as heavy as the stuff that I think that Taylor Sheridan does. This dude is killing it right now. Everything he makes is gold. He's working with everybody. He's now worked with Harrison Ford. He's worked with Helen Mirren over on uh, what's the other one? Mayor
Oh,
of
yeah,
Kings,
yeah,
not Mayor of Kingstown. The one with Stallone. So he's worked with
yeah,
Stallone.
yeah.
Um,
Did you already say Costner?
yeah, he's working with Costner. Now he's working with Morgan Freeman and Nicole Kidman, and
Great.
he's and Zoe Saldana. This one is not a cowboy story. It is it's called Special Ops the Lioness, and Zoe Saldana is. It starts off, the opening scene is taking place in the Middle East somewhere. She's a soldier on the not the front line, but she's in a special ops unit, and they have an undercover agent that's blown, and it's pretty gritty. Like the opening scene is pretty gritty. It seems like it's going to be right up there with his other shows as far as the quality of what we're seeing. So I'm gonna dig deeper into it. Maybe I'll talk about it more next week when I've actually watched it, hopefully. But it's good. You can tell just by the opening that they're not going to pull any punches. It's up to his usual standard of the show that he's making, and the dude is solid gold right now. Like if I was working on a project and somebody said, hey, Tyler Sheridan's going to work on that with you, I'd be like, we're set, we're good.
You know,
So
when situations like that, I wonder, like, where did he even find the time? Like, where does he find the time to do? And actually, with the writer's strike, like, how is that going to affect this shit? I mean, it's already done, right? But
yeah,
like, still,
it's already produced, so it'll come out the next season of any shows if they haven't already been filmed. So there's a few gotchas with that. Now that the actors strike is on, it's a lot harder. Also, but at a earlier, when the script was already written, you could film it even with the writer's strike on, as long as you didn't make any changes to the script, as long as you didn't need to employ any writers. But as soon as you had to make a change to the script, even if it was ad-libbed, like that was the thing about Deadpool that was really sketchy, right? Is that they were going to start filming Deadpool because it was done, and they have been filming Deadpool to a point. But they were going to have to rely heavily on the script. Like they couldn't change anything that was in the script, which is weird to me that they would make that move, because I feel like so much is improvised to a degree by Ryan Reynolds. Um, so I don't know, and I think that's on hold now too because of the actors strike. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how all that stuff lands in there. Um, and I know the producers tried to come back to the table finally, like last week, and everybody was like, "Yeah, your offers are still shit." They're like, what are you doing?" Like they're trying to make themselves look good by coming back to the table, but they're coming back to the table with shit. So the strike is still on. Bigger names are coming out to the front lines, and it's going to get ugly before it gets better. Although I don't know, did you see the drama with Stephen Amell last week?
I
Of
heard he said something that was very much against the writer's strike or something like that.
It wasn't. So it was a little out of context or poorly documented, as clickbait so often is. Like the article titles were like, "Oh, he thinks the strike is stupid,"
Yeah.
and he's totally against the strike. And what he was really saying, he understands the reason for the strike. He believes in the reason for the strike, but he does feel like striking and picketing is kind of an antiquated way to do things. Like it would be nice if there was a better way to do this, is effectively what he was saying. He didn't say it very articulately. And it was published as he's just like, oh, I don't think we should be doing this and fuck all the little people. And that's not quite what he meant. What he was just saying is like, this sucks. And then the other one that came out last week was they blasted Zach what's his face, Shazam, Zach Levi, because he was up at a panel, and he's like, oh, these rules. He's like, basically what he said was, I can't talk about the show where I was a spy. I can't, because he couldn't say the names of any of the shows, because when you're on strike, you can't talk about the work that you've done on specific shows. You can talk about the experiences and the people, but you can't talk about the show. So as when you're on strike, it really limits what you're allowed to talk about. And he's like, this is stupid, but I can't do this. And everybody was like, oh, he just called the strike stupid. And he was like, that's not what I fucking said. He's like, it's stupid that we're here. It's stupid that I can't talk about the thing that you want me to talk about because of this shit that is created by the producers, right? Like he was not calling the strike stupid. He wasn't, the rules suck, but they're not stupid because they're stupid. They're stupid because the situation is fucking stupid,
Right.
you know? And so it's tricky right now because we live in this clickbaity world where what sucks is a couple of these articles were by the Hollywood Reporter, who I usually find to be
Exactly.
pretty
Yeah, they're legit. It's not we got this covered, right?
yeah,
So
exactly. And so I was kind of shocked at the way that it was handled by the Hollywood Reporter. Um, but I think it's just a messy situation until it gets resolved. People are going to be taken out of context, and sometimes I think intentionally to spice up the story. Um, but I think generally speaking, I think a lot of actors understand, and a lot of big actors are coming out and saying, yeah, sure, we make all the money, but there's a lot of people that deserve the money that they get, and they've been showing. Even bigger actors, even people that have done bigger work, are now showing their residual checks from projects that are now on Netflix, and they're like dollars, and it's because the streamers don't do a good job. They're not held to the same standards as the networks, because the networks, you have the Nielsen ratings and you say X number of people watch this and blah blah blah, and then the ads come in for that. Well, because Hulu and Netflix have their no ad plans, they're just like, oh well, we don't know how many people watched it, and we don't know if they watched it because it was streaming and whatever. Like, so they don't report their numbers at all, and so the way that they pay their residuals doesn't work the same.
So basically, I just don't know if you saw this. Billy Porter from
Mm-hmm.
Poe, he basically said he has to sell his house
Yeah,
uh, because of the strike. And he talked about how, he was supposed to be in a new movie and a new television show starting in September. None of that's happening, and it's very much check to check. He also slammed Bob Iger for saying that, the strike demands were not realistic.
yeah,
Um, to hear Bob Iger say that demands are for living wage are not realistic while he makes 78,000 a day,
yeah,
it's,
yeah. Right. Like, there's a interview out there, if you on social media somewhere, with Sean Gunn, James Gunn's brother, who basically said the same thing about Bob Iger. He's like, come on, dude. He's like, you're just, to say it's not realistic is just, it's not realistic. Like, for you to say that when you're making, because he points out, like, there was one point when CEOs made 40 times what their lowest paid person made. And to me, that's semi-realistic. Like, the CEO worked their way to the top, they did all their shit, they make a lot of money, and you're talking about them versus their lowest paid person. Okay, Iger's making 400 times what the lowest paid person is. So at some point, who's ridiculous, right? Like, for him to make, what was it going to be, like $40 million, to take over Disney for a year, with his bonuses and with all this stuff, while people are literally unable to work or feed their family. You'd really, like, who's being unrealistic when you're talking about the scale of the amount of difference in that contract, the amount of people that are working. You could take half of his, or two-thirds of his income, he would still be a rich son of a bitch making, $10 million a year. That's a lot of money, and all that other money could go to the people that are actually creating the content that's getting him paid.
yeah.
So it's going to get worse before it gets better, I think. And yeah, and until then, we'll have the Golden Bachelor.
Do you think is this strike going to last longer than the last one?
I think so. It's already over 100 days. So granted, that's the writer's strike and not the actor strike. The actor strike started later. But I think this is going to go for a while because I don't think the producers are going to be realistic for a while. I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better, and it's nice to see people like The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, put like $1 million of his own money into the SAG fund for out of work actors. And I would like to see more big stars putting that money in, and kind of lifting up the people that really need it. If you live in a $20 million home, you can probably help out some people that are struggling to make it. um so we'll see, but it will, I think, get worse before it gets better, because for now the producers feel like they have the upper hand. They have all this stuff that's already made, that's already in the can, that they're putting out, that they're going to make money on. But at the same time, like, that Iger talked about how this year's Disney films didn't do that well. Well, their marketing was shit. Elemental, for everybody that I've seen that's actually seen it, was a pretty decent film. Maybe not the best Pixar film ever made, but it was a pretty decent film, and it wasn't advertised at all. Like it was advertised like it was coming directly to Disney Plus, and they were putting it in the theaters. So who's to blame? If you don't advertise your own product, and then you're wondering why nobody's watching it, well, it's because nobody knew it was there. And you can blame the product, but if people enjoyed it, the product itself wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And now, on top of everything else, um uh, I never watched The Real Housewives, but Bethany Frankel, I think her name is,
Mhm.
she's working on getting the reality TV people to strike, because they're getting screwed. Like, there's not much money coming in for them either. Like, if these companies, if the producers lose reality television,
It's a wrap.
then what the fuck is left? Like, so yeah, if yeah, if that happens, like, craziness, just madness. So I think at some point the producers are going to have to get realistic, but I think it's going to take a huge kick in the nuts for them to do it. They all think that they're going to pull on reality television, but I just read an article too about how the budgets for reality television are at an all-time low. Like, they're screwing reality TV out of tons of money too, and um, the last strike um, was like the reality TV boom, and they put a bunch of money into it, and all that, and it's the opposite right now. Like, reality TV producers are struggling to find jobs even now. Like, it's or directors, I guess, not producers, but they're all struggling to find work right now. And you would think it would be the opposite. Like, you'd think that the networks would be like, let's make the Golden Bachelor, the Golden Bachelorette, something. And they're struggling. So I don't know. It's we're in a transition period right now that's going to be heavy. And then on top of that, if it goes on too long, then all the things that they want to produce are going to take longer, because they're going to have to start later and then get made. So yeah.
Last question. Is there the possibility of like scab labor type stuff in this situation?
There's always the possibility of it, but the problem is that it's a small, it doesn't feel like it, but it's a small enough industry that if you cross that line, once everything is settled, no one is going to work for you. So if you are willing to cross that line, you better find a way to make enough money to retire on, because you're not going to work in this fucking industry after that. It's very
Closing
it's just
it.
it's a disrespect across the board. Like, if you cross that line, um there's a lot of writers out there that there's some people out there that are like, yeah, I'll work, I have a script and blah blah blah. And everybody's like, cool, dude, you better hope that script lands for you, because everybody, um in the actors union, everybody in the writers union, everybody in those writers rooms, they're watching. Like, they know if you cross that line, you're not coming back across when when all is said and done. So a few people will try, but it won't be the career that they're hoping for that comes out of it. So we'll see on that front too. But like I said, if the reality TV stuff starts to strike, what's left? AI. They're going to plug shit into AI, animate it, write it, animate it, and do it. That's going to be the last bastion of hope for television. Um, and
You
that,
know,
and
I actually kind of see it happening.
I can see it happening to a degree, especially in the animated field.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also don't think AI is ready for that. Like, I don't think it's good enough for that. I've seen some of the better AI scripts, and the problem is that to make them better, you still need a
Someone has
person
to,
to come in and
yeah,
do it. So who's that person, and what is their actual job? And if they do it, are they crossing a line, or is it a producer? Is it a
yeah,
producer putting shit into an AI and then and
yep.
then doing it? So we'll see. I don't think it's there yet. I think when they do that, that's going to be too much. And the other gotcha with that is we're seeing it in the art world right now with AI. People are like, look at this thing that I created with AI, and artists are like, yeah, dude, it's scrubbing other people's actual work to create this. So yes, it's being done artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence is stealing other people's stuff and cramming it together to make the product they want. So where along the lines is that theft
I
versus
love it.
not?
It's such a paradigm because that reminds me, if you remember the Beastie Boys Paul's Boutique album, like they didn't get in trouble for it, but there's no way they could have made that today because that was all samples. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I think the first major sample lawsuit was Just a Friend with Biz Markie, the guy who actually made the music that sample was like he sued him and won. So yeah, it's the best part
Well,
about
yeah,
it
you had the
was
Vanilla Ice and Queen one between
yeah.
um
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Yeah. Under pressure.
yeah,
For
and Ice Ice Baby.
maybe.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of those out there. So I mean, we'll see, but the problem there is the burden is, especially with the way AI kind of cramps stuff together. How do you prove that your thing was the model for it if it's not exactly the same? Like if it took
Of course.
20 things, if it took 20 things to cram together, if you can't point to that exact thing and say this was mine and it took it, you're out of luck.
No, yes, but at the same time, and I think it's like it. I personally think it's bullshit, but like whatever, it's courts. Do you remember that song "Blurred Lines" by Robin
Yep.
Thicke?
Yep.
Okay, and he won the lawsuit. They actually said that "Blurred Lines" stole from "Got to Give It Up" by Marvin Gaye. I'm sorry. To this day, I think that's bullshit. Yes, are there similarities? Yes, but was it a ripoff? No. It has its own feel. I mean, in that case, in my opinion, Caribbean Queen by Billy Ocean stole Billie Jean because it's literally like the same idea where it's like dun 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 dun, and then Billie Jean's who who and the bass line's similar, and it's just like, come on, stop it. And like Caribbean, like hey, da 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 da. The kid is not my son. Like there are similarities, dude. So like to me, it's like, but when Robin Thicke lost that lawsuit, I said all it takes is some pissed off legal motherfuckers to go to court and decide what reality is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. For
So,
sure.
yeah. So I feel like with this AI shit, they'll do the same thing. It's all, it's a
With the
money grab.
courts, it's just all about the last person to win, right? Because as soon as you win something that hasn't been talked about, you set the precedent, and
Mm-hmm.
then that's how things go. I think, like I said, AI is tricky because you are going to have to prove that that's your stuff they're using. Like if this if this drawing behind me, right, was created by AI and I had drawn a clown picture, but it took 75 clown pictures and amalgamated them together to make it, how do I prove that mine was one of those? um it's just, it's hard, it's real hard.
Well, I gotta say, for having just seen two things on my end, two things on your end, plus a little bit of something towards the end, and then getting into some cool stuff about the writer's strike, and hitting the almost 2 hour mark. Actually 1 hour and 46 minutes so far,
And
it looks
there's
like.
like 10 minutes of me murdering a moth in there. So
I think this was once again a decent showing by the APNC crew. And I will also breadcrumb that with Blue Beetle coming out, and then of course people were raving about TMNT, maybe
mhm.
I'll back with reviews on those.
Do a
Maybe.
double header next week.
Mhm.
We record. Yeah, I'd really be curious because we've talked about TMNT in the chat, but I haven't spoken to anybody that's seeing it. And um, all I'm hearing is that for what it is, people are just laughing through the whole
Love
damn
it.
thing, like
Yes.
loving it. It's fun. It's going to get set up for a sequel. Like it's gonna do its thing. Um, and then, like I said, Blue Beetle sounds like it's going to be good. Like I said, I don't think it's going to get the recognition that it probably is going to deserve, but from all the reviews I'm seeing that don't feel as hyped up as the Flash reviews were, like because the Flash was definitely like front loaded by everybody that
Stephen King.
whatever, and it was, and to be fair, everybody that I talked to that saw it did like it, but it was like super hyped. These reviews that I'm seeing feel like more kind of home baked reviews, like people that are getting an opportunity to see it, but they're not being force fed it and then sent out to do a review. Um, so I'm definitely curious about it. I hope it does really well. Like I feel bad saying that when I'm not going to go out and spend the money on it, you know. But I hope it does really well, and then I can't wait to see it stream so that I can watch it. Which for me may be the better situation, anyways, because that pushes it that much closer to the actual universe that it's going to settle into. Um, so yeah,
All right.
cool. Well, with that, I will say to everybody out there, thank you for watching. If Pete ever posts this, thank you for listening. We're way behind on the audio channel, I know. So if you're
I
listening to
noticed.
this, tell me what 2036 is like. And with that, I will say have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.
There's that big.
That is big. I saw it.
Jesus Christ.
Yo, do you have any do you have a spray? You might want to take care of it.
No, I don't know where it went, but it's a condor
Yeah.
flying around here. Um, but
You have better nerves than I.
yeah,
I'd be like, I'd be like grabbing the raid, dude.
yeah. So, Jesus Christ. As soon as it buzzes in my head, I'm going to lose my. But until then, I'll be fine.
Oh my God. Yo, I freaked out from here. It's like watchful, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like where the is where's Godzilla when you need him? I hit it like 3 times and it just didn't die. It was like, I don't know, it's a dinosaur or something. I don't know what that thing was.